Hey everybody, PKFT1 here, and quickly I just want to apologize. I haven't put out a video recently because I made a move, so I am in a new environment, new recording situation, so I'm just going to apologize in advance if there's any noise in the background that's not supposed to be there. I'm going to try to get it taken care of. The channel might go a little dark for a little bit, simply for the fact that I have some things going on with work and everything coming up here soon, so I might be really busy. But I'm going to try my best to keep up with the channel. That being said, let's just jump into it. Okay guys, so today is going to be a rambling video, and I don't know if anybody's really going to be interested in that. But today I wanted to talk about my slow descent into the Shin Megami Tensei rabbit hole, as it were. That being said, I haven't actually beaten a mainline Shin Megami Tensei game yet. I've gotten pretty far into SMT 5 and Nocturne, and I recently picked back up SMT 5. My playthrough started, from day one when it came out, and I probably got about halfway through and then got distracted with something else. And now I've recently come back to it and have really found myself sucked into it. As I get further and further along, trying to fuse specific demons or seeing what I can make and just exploring that world. It kind of fascinates me how that game kind of came and went without a whole lot of fervor or talk around it beyond the initial reviews that came out of it. And now I see a lot of discourse surrounding it, which, is valid in some ways, I assume, but I'm not going to go too deep into that because I want to talk about SMT as a whole. But that was kind of the jumping point for me to really find myself fascinated with the entire franchise, and so I kind of delved from there. So now I'm currently playing 5, Nocturne, 4, and 1 semi-simultaneously, which is a really interesting exercise in memory and patience, because jumping between those games, there's a lot that carries over, but at the same time, you're dealing with slightly different systems, and you're dealing with different consoles, and it's very fun, but at the same time can be a little bit off-putting at times. That being said, I've really found myself fascinated with the entire SMT lore and all of the entries in the franchise. Before, I would consider myself primarily a Persona fan with, an interest in Shin Megami Tensei, but now I feel like I've definitely gotten to the point where I can call myself a Shin Megami Tensei fan. But there's so much to Shin Megami Tensei as a whole, right? Between the demons, the law and chaos systems, the various spin-offs that are out there, and then you have, of course, Aya Nishitani's novels, which I actually took some time within the past week or so to read through Digital Devil's story and had a really interesting time with it. I don't want to delve into that too much, though, because I have a video that's going to be coming out, hopefully within the week or so, that will cover that. And needless to say, it's very different from what you might expect in some ways, but at the same time, it still has very dark elements. I think when I say that, what I should say is I didn't find the book to necessarily be like this enthralling piece of literature, but apparently at the time it was, because it inspired the Megami Tensei games that I think, was it Namco who put out, and then of course Shin Megami Tensei, and inspired the entire SMT franchise as a whole. Without that, we wouldn't have any of the things we love. So it's kind of fascinating from that perspective, how a book that I might just not think much of now spawned this entire media empire. Those who are probably SMT enthusiasts probably would disagree with me harshly on that, but needless to say, that's how I feel. But it is a fascinating piece of media, considering what it spawned. And then, of course, it had an OVA, which I ended up watching, which was surprisingly very true to the source material. And then I actually tried watching the other SMT OVA. I don't know if there's more than that, but the Tokyo I forget what the other word is, forgive me. The one that I think has a character that appears in Shin Megami Tensei. The one with, like, the plane that crashes, if you're familiar with that. Both very different, but also similar, kind of like Megami Tensei as a whole. And to me, that, like, there was something when I was playing SMT5 and watching these and reading the book that just, like, hooked me. And it's something about the setting of Shin Megami Tensei, rather than really any of the characters or the story. The combat system is up there too, but this idea of collecting demons and them kind of taking over the modern world and seeing how they interact with the world or with the protagonist, being able to negotiate with them, kind of striking deals with them, seeing which demons are good, which ones are bad. Even the eclectic collection of demons, some being biblical, some being just like random fantasy creatures like Pixie or Jack Frost, or some of them being like Egyptian gods, and how you can kind of like put all these things together and there still be this cohesive bond between all of them. It's a lot of fun. You know, an easy comparison, and I know Pokemon came after, is Pokemon, and it's like that, except Pokemon, as I got older, never had that same draw to it for me. There was a point where Pokemon just kind of felt like, all right, they're just making up this, you know, weird thing and slapping a cute design on it, or something that looks too robotic or aerodynamic for me to associate any sort of feelings of connection with. But with Shin Megami Tensei, you know, sometimes they redesign the demons, sometimes the demons, you know, have this interesting backstory, and I still feel like I know, like, none of the demons. Like, I recognize a lot of them, but if you ask me to name, like, 10 of them, I'd be so bad at remembering any of their names, or at least being able to associate the design with the name specifically. If you showed me a picture of it, I'd be like, oh yeah, I know that demon, I like that one, that one's really cool. But that's about the extent as far as it goes, other than, like, you know, the Jack brothers. So I don't know, it's weird, the things that I find myself connecting to, and I know this is a rambling video and it's kind of intended to be that way. But my descent into this rabbit hole, again, started with SMT5, and then I really got interested in seeing, well, what else is out there, and I was learning about things like the Last Bible series, or, like I mentioned before, Shin Megami Tensei, which I think is, if they were ever to fan translate anything fully, that is the game I'd be most interested in playing it. And you might wonder why, if you know anything about it, and it's just because of the dark nature of the story. I know there's some other things in there too, but to me, after seeing kind of the shocking nature of it, I just thought it sounded so fascinating. And I think there's something about the fact that it was a PC 98 game that kind of let them get away with more than they would have if it was, you know, a mainline title that released on, you know, other consoles. So there was some freedom there that I don't necessarily think is expressed in the other games. And when I say freedom, I just mean freedom of the creators to kind of include what kind of material they wanted. So with that all said, it's interesting coming in as a Persona fan, because as a Persona fan, I always found myself being drawn to more of the social elements rather than necessarily the combat system or the demon collection itself. But the more I played, you know, it grew on me. And the thing about Persona, having Personas kind of take the center stage even over the demons in a lot of ways, and the various monsters that the villains turn into, kind of feels like it's so distracting from the other SMT elements that you almost forget that you were even doing all those classic SMT things, like collecting demons along the way. And I know that sounds silly, and other people probably have a different experience from me, but because there are so many things to do, it really feels like an entirely different game when you step into any of the Shin Megami Tensei mainline games. Not to mention the story is very different, and the setting and the characters and the different paths you can take. And so it took, I think, a little bit of getting used to for me, learning to love the grind and, you know, the more hardcore elements. You know what's interesting to me, and I think I've seen this sentiment shared by other people, including, I know Oziak said something about this. You kind of psych yourself up when you go to play a Shin Megami Tensei game if you've heard about the franchise and everybody tells you how difficult it is, particularly things like Nocturne. And you almost like expect this like a really big barrier of entry. And it's not as bad as you'd think. I don't think so. Well, I mean, I'm sure with other entries it's a lot different. Just the ones I played, which are primarily the mainline games. But even the things that I heard were like insanely difficult, I would get to, and it wouldn't really be that much of a struggle. And that isn't me tooting my own horn or trying to make it sound like I'm great at this game. I mean, I was the guy who made a whole review and talked about how the stupid Okumura boss got to me. So, that's nothing me trying to sound better than anyone. It's just that I think sometimes we can talk ourselves out of something because we think it's going to be too difficult. And here's the thing. I know there are going to be stumbling blocks that might be completely different from other people's stumbling blocks. Or something that I just can't get past could just be an entire roadblock entirely. But I think everyone should give it a try at some point. And even if you don't maybe engage with the games, there's so much other media out there. Even things that aren't even real Megami Tensei spin-offs, but you could maybe include as something that's like a really weird distant relative. Like, for instance, as I was delving into looking into all these different types of titles, I found myself looking into Groove On Fight. If I'm not mistaken, it's like the third entry or fourth entry in the Power Instinct series, which is like an Atlas fighting game franchise. Fither did a video either with, I can't remember if it was Ultima or if it was Nam's Compendium. I think it was Nam's Compendium, where they were talking about a Shin Megami Tensei fighting game and what that could be like, who it could include. I wouldn't have much to add to that because I don't remember half the characters in SMT, but there is a character in Groove On Fight, and I'm sure a lot of you probably already know this if you're really into SMT. That's a devil summoner. And I found that to be such a fascinating thing. Like, Atlas has this connection that's so deep and intrinsic to it, to Shin Megami Tensei, that in these things that aren't even branded SMT, you're still getting cool stuff like that pops up. Maybe that bothers some people, but to me it's kind of like, it really shows where Atlas's heart truly lies. I think even nowadays, if Atlas had to create one thing, I know a lot of people would say Persona, but I think Atlas's heart truly does lie with the SMT series because of the freedom that comes with it and what you can do with that, and how, no matter what you do with it, it's always cool, it's always fun. Everybody likes to see the world shift and change with each of these demons and how you can interact with them. I know I delved into that a little earlier, but going back to Groove On Fight, having this devil summoner pop up and be able to use all these demons in battle, it just sounds like such a fun thing, and I want to check it out. And that kind of brings me to where I am today, where I'm like trying to build this collection. And so far, the only games I have physically, aside from like the Persona games, is like the Nocturne re-release and SMT5, and I have nothing else physically. And no, that's it. I don't, because I was gonna say I have 4, but I have that digitally. In fact, I don't even think I have Nocturne physically. Okay, so the only game I have physically is 5. But I've seen a lot of people who have like massive collections. I just saw one yesterday, and there's so much stuff where it's like I almost just want to own it just to have like the box art or whatever, because SMT has so much cool box art through all the different re-releases they've done, and you can still collect for the SMT franchise, and it's relatively cheap compared to some other things. I mean, there are definitely some rarer titles in there that are going to cost you a bit, but compared to some other things, I feel like you could get a good bit of the collection for a decent price. And so that's what I really want to start collecting for next, so I can become a true fan. I'm just kidding. I have to own everything to be a true fan. But I think it would be cool to own some of it. And I have a thing about going to physical stores and looking for the games like in person. There's something about the chase of like a game and then you find it, and then it's just like so cathartic that you found it in store and you can walk out that day with it. But you also go in not expecting anything, because I don't know how many retro game stores I've been to recently where I've just been looking for even just something like, Digital Devil Saga, and I'm always disappointed. Or even just like a physical copy of Nocturne on PS2 and not being able to find, I can't find any DS games, 3DS games, not even SMT4. So I often walk out a little disappointed. That being said, I could just go on Amazon and buy these games and it wouldn't be a big deal. And that's probably what I'm going to end up doing. But one of these days, I think it would be cool to stumble upon one of those. The accessibility of the franchise, it's very scattered, but I feel like you could start with any of these entries and, really get to the core of what makes or breaks yourself as an SMT fan. Because I feel like, you might have to try a few games to really get into it, and maybe you already are. Probably if you're watching this, you are. But if you haven't tried it, I would just try to see what's on whatever console you have, or if you can emulate a game, and just try it out and kind of push yourself. Because I feel like for me, you almost have to push yourself past a little bit of a barrier of entry, and then once you're there, you're kind of sucked in, or you get it, or you don't, and that's fine too. I feel like there's a lot of gatekeeping nowadays, speaking as a Persona fan who then later got into SMT, I wouldn't worry about it. If you don't connect with it, that's fine too. If you just want to be a Persona fan, I think that's fine too. Heaven knows I was for a long time, but you really should try to see what else is out there, and maybe it will help your tastes expand, and then you'll find enjoyment a lot of other things that you didn't like. I didn't necessarily think I was going to enjoy SMT1, but luckily I found a fan translation and I was able to get it working on my PS Classic. And I really hope to see more fan translations appear, because I'm really enjoying myself with it, and there are certain games that I really think would be cool to play eventually. That being said, as we finish off this video and my rambling, are there any fan translations or fan projects even that you guys would recommend? And also, is there anything that you guys are hoping for in the future either gets a translation, or maybe you've heard of a fan project that is in development that you're following? Anything that you might recommend, I'm really interested in. I'm very open to it right now because it's kind of the thing that I found right now is my recent obsession. And I'm sure all of you go through spurts of that. So again, any recommendations, leave comments below. And if you have anything cool that you want to share, I'm totally open to it. So thank you guys for tuning in and entertaining me. Again, I'm hoping maybe at the end of the week, or maybe it'll be early next week, I'll have a project that's a lot more concise that will touch on Digital Devil Story and Aya Nishitani and my experience with reading that. Or if you just want like a quick summary, I should have a summary that kind of goes over the story in that too. So if you're interested in the origins of Megami Tensei, go ahead and check out that video. Again, it'll be out in a week, or if you're watching this later, it could be already up, and I'll leave a link to it here. So thank you guys so much for checking out this video, and I hope that you have a good one.